Jesus, no eye in the sky. Moonshine Jesus, baby, don't lie. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show, brought to you as always by ProgressiveChristianity.org, a wonderful place to find all the progressive Christian resources you might need. I hope you will follow them on social media and that you'll follow us on Facebook and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I am joined, as always, by Mark Sandlin. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing great, Caleb. This might be one of my favorite shows that we're ever going to do, just based on what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
I'm hoping. Yeah, it has to. Come on.
It can't not be fun because today we are talking about Dune Part 2, and we have been waiting for this for quite a while. But I know you, especially, Mark, are a big Dune fan, right?
I read the novels. I read the novels, and I read them when they came out. So back in the yeah. I'll age myself a couple of times during this one, I'm afraid. But yeah, I read them when they came out. I was a big fan of the first book in particular. Other books I kind of made it through, but the first book, big fan. So I've always been just hoping someone would come around and do it justice,
Do it justice. And we'll talk about it, but maybe they have.
Absolutely.
But before we can talk about all of that good stuff, we do need to let you know that if you haven't seen Dune Part 2, we will have some spoilers, but that can be a good thing, right? You can go into Dune ready to look for theology and politics, or just to know some of the geeky stuff that's going to happen. You can geek out even more if you know it's coming. But if you're not ready for that, just know we will have some spoilers. And before we get into it, we also need to pour ourselves a drink. So do you have a drink, Mark?
I am. I did. I invented my own drink. I wanted something that looked like the water of life. Which plays a pivotal role. I kind of was guessing that you might go that way too, but that's why I made it up. Saying, like, if I make it up, we're definitely going to be different. And then I threw in an ingredient I was pretty sure there was no way you were going to use. So mine is vanilla vodka, blue curacao, and then Mountain Dew Voltage. Because it's blue and it's a citrus raspberry, which goes along with the curacao.
Yeah.
And then I rimmed it out with cinnamon sugar, so it would look like spice.
So that's really good.
The spice is very slow, but look at the color of that. I think I just about nailed. You nailed the water of life, man. So what did you go with? Did you end up with the water of life?
I went with water of life too, but I did not invent my own. I found a recipe online, and it is similar to yours, though not identical. It is vodka, blue curacao, and lavender-infused simple syrup. And they drink it in the movie out of this very unique carafe. So I didn't have a carafe quite like that, but I did get a carafe that I'm going to use to
pour it out.
Pour my water of life in. So
nice.
Cheers to you, Mark.
Cheers to you as well. We'll see everybody on the other side.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for our Geek Out segment. So, Caleb, you've already mentioned that you knew that I was a big reader of the books. I'm curious, were you a Dune book reader?
I was not. So I not only that, Mark, but I also have still not yet seen the 1980s Dune, which seems like a sin. If ever there's a sin for like nerds, it feels like not watching the
it's sort of required watching, man. It's
I know
sort of required.
No, but I had seen Dune Part 1, and I had gone into this movie with quite a bit of excitement, and so I enjoyed the first Dune movie, but I don't have a super rich Dune background. So
fair.
I'm
Well,
excited because I know that you do have a super
we'll
rich
see.
Dune
We'll
background.
see, because I will say that I when I was in high school and college, I definitely did. And then they started trying to make it into films or shows and never really got it right. And I kind of turned my nose up and was like, well,
I'm done.
And it's part of why they have historically, kind of traditionally, people basically say that Dune, is just sort of an unfilmable story. It's so complex. There's so many layers to it, so many characters, so much politics going on, so much interstate commerce. Like, there's just so much going on that it's very difficult to make into a movie. I have to say, I was pretty happy about how closely I think this one really followed the books. And some of the other ones, they changed it up enough that you noticed it too much, and it felt like it even walked away a little bit from the intent of what this was supposed to be about. So I watched it with a giant screen with the best sound system in town, and I have to say, man, personally, I think this film will be nominated for as many as 10 Oscars.
Okay, 10.
And that it will win at least 6 of them, and none of those will have anything to do with acting.
Visual effects. It's got to win an Oscar for visual effects.
I think
and
visual
story.
Effects it has to. Yeah,
story
adaptation. Director's got to get production design probably in there. Cinematography, hands down. There's not going to be a movie as beautiful as this one this year. It is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There's just so many other visual effects were incredible. Original score. Zimmer has to win that. Absolutely has. So I'm curious. What was your favorite? Since I don't think they're going to win in any acting categories, although I'm thinking Austin Butler could surprise me. But in general, I don't think they're going to win in any acting categories. So outside of the acting, what was your favorite sort of technical, creative part of the movie?
So I think the cinematography was beautiful, and I think that my favorite scene was whenever we get that kind of gladiator-esque Colosseum, where they're under the black moon, and we get the black and white visual. That was so visually stunning.
And here's the thing. That's why he's going to get nominated for Best Director. Choices like that. That's not in the book. That world being under a black sun, as far as I remember, that's not even a book thing. That was his choice to make that world feel like its own thing and give it that cinematic, massive kind of epic feel to it.
And that was something that was very incredible in terms of world building, because I think that's, outside the question you asked, but one of the things that is incredible about this is just that you feel the scale of world building in a way that I haven't felt in a movie in a very long time, and maybe not ever done quite as well as this, or not recently done quite as well as this. And so I think going and seeing this visual story, it brings in your senses in a different way. And so for me, that was one of the moments in the film. There were a lot this was one of the moments in the film where I'm like, I'm watching something pretty incredible here.
Right.
And it kind of it had me step away from the movie for a second to be like, this is kind of a masterpiece.
Right. Yeah. I did the same thing. I don't even remember what scene it was, but I remember all of a sudden having been completely enthralled in the show, and then stepping back, kind of like you were saying, almost taking a kind of a deep breath and going, this is a big moment. This is there. And here I'll go back to how old I am. This is up to, like, this is like the feeling I was sitting in Empire Strikes Back or Back to the Future, and in the theater, and had this overwhelming realization that this is going to be big. A decade, 2 decades from now, people are still going to be talking about this, that it's that good. And I want to echo something you were just talking about, because obviously I'm doing this segment, so I thought I was about the fact that I was going to ask you this question about non-technical favorite part. And at the first thought cinematography, but then I thought I can't leave the music out. Then it hit me, and partly because of the show we reviewed last week, Monolith, and how I talked about on that one of the things I hate about movies is when they tell you and don't show you. But Monolith was only telling you, hardly showing you anything, and they did it brilliantly. I think this movie is the perfect example of showing you and not telling you. I don't know if you can do it better. I'm not sure any movie's ever done it better. And I've heard that the director, that's kind of like what he wanted. Like, he was like, I'm in doing a visual format. I want less dialogue and more visuals moving the story forward. I thought he did a brilliant job.
He definitely accomplished that. He definitely did, because there were large stretches of the music or movie where there was not a lot of dialogue, but where the visuals, and I think the music too, the score was really driving along what was happening as we were seeing the people go different places. I also thought there was very wise editing here. I mean, you didn't
brilliant sometimes.
Even something as simple as like when they were going south to rally everybody, and we get enough of them riding on the sandworms to get the visual point of what that was. The thrill of it, without sitting there for 10 minutes watching.
That's one of those. There were lots of moments that reminded me of other movies, and that's one of them. They had a very Lawrence of Arabia feel when they were doing that massive movement.
That's true.
Popped up so many times. That kind of
sand blowing and
it really had that kind of that epic feel of in the desert and traveling and being the people who endure the desert kind of thing. It was just there's so many many brilliant things about that. So it's clear we both liked part 2 a lot. Coming into it based on part 1, first of all, what did you think of part 1? And then what did you think of part 2 in relationship to it?
So part 1 was really my introduction to Dune outside of, some cultural commentary or pieces of it here and there, the 1984 movie. And I thought Dune part 1 was okay, pretty good. Like, I enjoyed watching it, but it wasn't something that I, for instance, went back and watched again. Other than thinking about part 2. I enjoyed it, and I'm like, this was pretty cool. It's a grand scale. Part 2, on the other hand, I wanted to go watch it again. It's an almost 3-hour movie, and I wanted to go watch it again. Yes, I watched it
as quickly as possible.
Watch it again, as soon as possible.
And
I think that speaks to it. And Mark, earlier in the day, you had said, it makes us appreciate part 1 more, and I think that's right. Like, I also gained a deeper appreciation for part 1 than I had before. That it also gave me a desire to say, you know what, maybe I should go back and watch part 1, and then go back and watch part 2.
I'm going to do it. I've already decided I'm going to do it in one day. I don't know what day it's going to be, but I'm going to like pre-plan to watch part 1 and give myself enough travel time to be at the theater when part 2 starts, and then watch it, because they pick up where 1 leaves off.
We've just come up with a great idea for movie theaters to make money. Just a double screening, just put it back. We'll spend the whole day there.
Yeah, there's so many of us who didn't see part 1 in the theater because it was during COVID, and it was available on streaming. I can't remember if it was immediately available, because they were doing a lot of releases that were both in the theater, and I can't remember if that's what they did. But if not, it was available pretty quickly, and so I watched it. I got a pretty big television, but you can't duplicate what it deserves. And the sound system, again, I got a really nice sound system. It's still not the same. I mean, I could feel my bones rattling at times in the theater for bones. Speaking of bones rattling, that's my response, and I've had a little more time to think about it. Between part 1 and part 2, it makes me think of Ezekiel's Valley of Bones. Part 1 was describing the bones. It was telling us what's there. and it really was just trying to give it something to set on. And then part 2 was adding the sinews and the muscle and the skin and fully developing what this was going to be. And I thought,
that's good.
It was done so brilliantly. Like I said, man, were there other movies that kind of came to mind as you're watching? For me, like I said, Empire Strikes Back, New Hope, Back to the Future, Moments of Lawrence of Arabia. Even some Godfather type moments. And then 2 that I don't know if other people would have gone to. 1, maybe they did. The old Metropolis, like the classic historic sci-fi.
Yeah.
The visuals of this, and a lot of times, kind of felt like a throwback to those classic visuals from Metropolis.
Yeah.
But am I the only one who heard a little bit of Life of Brian in this?
That was not something that jumped to my mind right away. But
Life of Brian,
tell me more.
I'm thinking of the scenes where they're like, "Oh, I can't." It's been so long since I've watched that movie. Oh, he left his sandal. It's a sign that he's a Messiah. And he's like, "No, it's just my sandal. Leave me alone.
That's true. The Javier Bardem kind of did take on that role.
He was like, "Oh, he's so denying it. He's so humble." Of course,
blessed are the cheesemakers.
There were just moments where I was like, "Is that because they let?"
You've helped me appreciate this at a deeper level.
They let the one person who had a little bit of a humorous role have those lines. And so, because think about it, he was the one character that was actually from time to time intentionally funny and pulled it off really well. And that's the guy that gets to say, "Hey, he's the Messiah. No matter what he does, I'm going to figure out how to make him to be this." It's just, anyway. Were there other movies that kind of came to your mind as you were watching? I mean, that's one of the epic things about it. It's just, pulls from so much beautiful resources.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly Empire Strikes Back for me as well. And I've read a lot of other folks saying this felt like this kind of a moment that, if we're talking about one of the greatest sci-fi fantasy movies of all time, it's Empire Strikes Back, right? I mean, it's a touchstone movie for so many of us. And so certainly, yes, the epic nature and feel of it. So I was also comparing it in my mind as I was watching it, not just to those movies that have done a phenomenal job and have been benchmark movies, but also to other movies we've seen recently that did not hit that mark, even as they were trying. So the one that was most recently in my mind was Rebel Moon, since we talked about that very recently. So a movie I think that was trying to build the same kind of world as what we saw here, but didn't succeed for all kinds of reasons. And so as I was sitting there, I was thinking about that in my mind and about how much better and more immersive it can be when the filmmaker is so committed and has the right vision, has the right people involved in making it happen, that they can not just build a good film, but they can build an entire universe for all of us to experience in a way that goes beyond just sitting in that theater. And that was the kind of moment that I had as I was watching it, as I was like, this is extraordinary. This is maybe going to be one of those kind of things that you can't compare to others.
I definitely sat there in that moment that I was breathing in and kind of letting myself have just a moment to recognize what was going on, realizing in that moment I was participating in what will be considered cinematic history, like important cinematic history. Is that opening weekend when everybody went out and watched this movie that is going to end up being one of, if not the best thought of sci-fi movie ever. I'm going to leave with just one question that you kind of led us into with this epic world building, with the ending kind of giving us a little tease. On a scale of 1 to 100, how excited are you about the possibility? Technically, it's a possibility. When they get the numbers in from this weekend, it's going to be like 80 million or more, and it's going to get all these Oscars. It's going to be, and a matter of fact, I understand they're already working on writing it, even though they don't technically have the green light. On a scale of 1 to 100, let's just say win part 3. How excited are you for Part 3 on a scale of 1 to
1,000. I'm 1,000. I'm ready. I feel like that's going to be one of those midnight movies for me. You know,
I think so too.
because it's been
Isn't
a while.
that great?
I feel like
That's
it is great. It's
'Cause
great to have that
know it-
experience with other people too who love
And the
it.
moment you
who
said
are
that,
done.
I thought, oh, I'm definitely going to be there. Like the first showing I can see, I'm going to see it. I can't think of the last movie where I was so excited that I was like, I don't care what time of the day it is. I don't care what city I got to go to. I'm going to be at the first showing if there's anything I can do about it. I can't think of the last time.
Maybe the prequels, Star Wars prequels, before I had seen what they were gonna be. What they were gonna be.
Maybe.
I was excited about
I tell
those,
you, man. Is this? I have to. I know we're running over. I got to ask one quick little question. It's not a long answer. Is there any chance that this is the movie that saves Hollywood?
Ooh, maybe. I
Right. We're
I
gonna
think
leave
it
it with
could be.
maybe.
It's maybe.
We're gonna
Yes,
leave it.
maybe.
We're gonna leave it with maybe. We're gonna leave it with maybe.
Okay.
I think that's the perfect answer. We're gonna take a quick drop and come back and talk a little bit about the theo and politics of this amazing movie.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we're talking about Dune Part 2, and we are moving into our Theopolitico segment. And there was a lot there.
Oh my
It was
God.
not just a great movie, but one of the
Right.
things I think that often makes films really outstanding is whenever they are able to provide commentary on the world around us as well. And Dune certainly does that both theologically and politically. So one of the things that clearly stood out to me was the whole notion of messiahship, because that was central to what was happening here.
That
And
was in the
one
movie.
of the things that it was, wait, was that in there? No, there was
Are you
no,
sure?
there's nothing about a messiah. Nothing.
I think maybe there was one character that mentioned it. But I don't know.
No, nobody. So Zendaya's character, Shani, says at one point, if you want to control people, tell them a messiah will come and they'll wait for centuries. Mark, how does that play into religion and maybe Christianity specifically?
What a big question to start the segment off with. But listen, no, she's 100%.
Can you explain that in like 30 words or less, or what?
Four sentences or less. You got 1 minute. But yeah, I mean, this is just true about religion in general, particularly religion that's built around a Messiah figure. And then if you can push that figure out into the future, you can make a real promise about it, one that people will buy into and will feel like this could change my life. If you put if the people doing that are in a position that those that are listening have offered you their trust and in some way feel that you have established your right to offer that, then yes, you talk about what the coming Messiah will be like, how everything will be better when that arrives. You push it so far in the future that you don't really have to deal with it other than just reminding people about it, and you can just lead them around. It's like Shani also says, this prophecy is how they enslave us. It gets you to buy in so hard. And it's funny because, you know, the books were written back in the 70s. And it was really written about a lot that was going on in the Middle East at the time. But it is so contemporarily relevant right now, particularly in the United States, about people who are seeing political folks as messiahs and allowing them to not follow through on their promises of what they will do as Messiah, as the chosen one, as God selected, allowing them to not follow through on it and just keep pushing it into the future of, hey, don't worry, it's coming. I told you I'm going to do it. And it ain't far away. It's going to happen. Just stay with me a little bit longer. It's brilliant how it still holds up. It also tells us a lot, in my opinion, about humanity in general and our willingness to blindly follow. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're right. The parallel I see too is with religious fundamentalism and
Mhm.
the ways that we have projected Jesus is coming back into the future as a way of
Yeah.
not caring about what it is that we're supposed to care about. And I
Dangerous.
think a case in point is environmentalism. For the
Probably the
folks who,
best case.
yeah,
Best
say, hey,
example.
yeah, say, hey, we don't have to take care of the earth because Jesus is
Mm.
coming on back and the
Yeah.
world's going to end anyway. In fact,
Yeah.
if we do a bad job of taking care of the earth, that means Jesus is going to come back
No,
sooner.
usher it in faster, which
Yeah, that's right. He'll
is
come riding in on the
absolutely
clouds.
which it just one of the things that I kept having to like push to the back of my head during the movie because I was just wanting
Yeah.
to soak it in. As a person who
Uh-huh.
my first undergraduate degree was about movies, I just wanted to soak in everything that they were doing because it was so brilliant. But I kept having to push to the back of my head these concepts about Messiah and what Messiah is supposed to be, particularly the word Messiah and coming from the Jewish tradition and it being a person who was going to come and establish peace on earth. And all of the things that it was sort of hinting at and lending to were about destruction and war. And that's what it gets used. I mean, you think about Zionism today, Christian Zionism and what they say that the Messiah is going to do, but you have to have war in the Middle East, even though the founding principle of Messiah was about someone who was going to come and provide a place here on earth that provided peace and love and equality for all people. So it also just kept making me go, gosh, it's interesting how they dealt with this because he stayed pretty true to the books that were written in the 70s. It's interesting been even further skewed as time has gone on and the way that the idea of Messiah is being used today.
I think that's a great point. And it also reminded me of how Jesus's disciples misunderstood his messiahship. And I was thinking about how in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is telling his disciples, "Don't say anything." The messianic secret in the Gospel of Mark, but that it's about how they misunderstand him being the Messiah because they think it's like violent and he's going to be like a revolutionary, and he's not talking about that. He's talking about like a peaceful revolution, and how we still, misunderstand what a Messiah is supposed to do.
I have to say, some of the best work being done in what a Messiah is supposed to do right now is in progressive Judaism, and realizing that that was a symbol of what was to come, not a person that was to come, and recognizing that in a lot of ways there have been many quote messiahs that have been ignored and pushed to the side, and what it has to happen is all of us recognizing that there's part of the Messiah that we are a part of, that we come together to create all the things the Messiah was supposed to come around and provide for the planet. And that I think that's a brilliant and beautiful and probably very correct way of understanding that concept.
That's a great point, Mark, and it keeps us from worshiping a particular person or having all these expectations on a particular person. I've been moved by my Jewish friends who have talked about it in that way. One of the other things that we find in the movie, Mark, which as I understand it is a little bit different than in the books,
there are a few pieces that are different,
and this is about the division between northern and southern tribes and the fundamentalism in southern tribes. Can you tell me why we might have seen that in this movie?
Yeah, I mean, one of the striking things to anyone who's read the book is that describing the southern tribes as fundamentalist isn't in the books.
Right.
If you read them, you might think, oh, they're a little more conservative, but you don't. The word fundamentalist is not used. I think there's absolutely no doubt that the director saw, the echo of history happening once again, because it wasn't something that was so strong in the United States when he was writing about it. But I think the director saw the echo of it happening again and decided to point directly at fundamentalism in the United States by choosing to use that word and showing the issues it can cause when you blindly follow a leader, particularly one who ultimately becomes obsessed with power.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Happening in the world, in the U.S. right now.
No, thank God. Thank God we don't have anything like that. And you know what? I don't think this election coming up is going to be controversial either. There's not going to be
I'm sure
anything.
everybody's going to love the results and be cool with it, and we'll just
Yeah.
keep on rolling, man. We'll just keep on.
Everyone's going to be very well behaved too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think certainly too. It mirrors the United States, the North and the South, and
It absolutely does.
and the religious fundamentalism in the South, and I think that certainly that's very intentional, making commentary on the.
I think there's no doubt he was casting a warning sign to us. He was saying,
yes,
you need to be aware that the zealotry can become violent very quickly without a lot of the best cause. It can just be because one person hits the right switches quickly enough and frequently enough that everyone, it's like a wildfire, that it just, once he lights that match, boom, it goes. I think he was clearly using this as political commentary on the U.S.
And I mean, we saw exactly that. The United States, where most of us would describe a stable democracy, that after the results of the last election, we saw an insurrection. And I think that very quickly we all wanted to move past that. We all wanted to pretend like, okay, well, that was just an isolated one-day kind of thing that luckily is in our past now, and we're past without the recognition that the former president of the United States, who helped to cause that insurrection, is running for president again this year. And even if he weren't, that instability is.
I'm not sure that most of us wanted to just forget about it. I really do think, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist person, but I do think the powers that be knew that it was to their benefit to not allow people to get too fixated on that. I was banned from live broadcasting on Facebook for several months.
I remember that,
simply because of a sermon that talked about the wise men compared to the proud boys, and how they had very different understanding about what following God and being a religious person who understands what God desires in this world looks like. And I happened to before it was being printed a lot, because it was literally the Sunday after it. The only thing I did was name the insurrectionists as insurrectionists.
Insurrectionists,
and the powers that be shut me down for abusive language, I think, or something like that.
How dare you call out the racists, Mark? I mean, come on. Aren't we?
I'm just saying. I do think that there was a concerted effort by certain people in power to try to tamp down on how much the world was talking about, particularly in the United States, of how we got what just happened, and then because of it, start analyzing how we got there. This movie is a great example of talking about what can happen within groups of people that would allow for that to happen.
Yeah. I think we've both seen in recent history, and I think you're right, through this movie, how easy we can slide into that kind of space. Yeah. I have about 1 million questions that I would love to be able to explore, Mark, about both theology and politics. But if I continue to just berate you with a bunch of questions, we won't get to our last segment, which is our Make Me Look Stupid segment. And if we don't get to that, it would just be a real shame. So why don't we take a quick break and come back and try and make each other look stupid?
Hello and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. You're joining us for one of our favorite segments, let's just be honest, the Make Me Look Stupid segment. And honestly, it's a little more aggressive sounding than it actually is. Yes, We do provide the opportunity for someone to ask a question to make us look stupid, but sometimes we are making ourselves look stupid by admitting, hey, I have no idea what the answer to this question is. I'd love for you to tell me. And so you did not steal any of my questions. I'm very happy about this because
we're too excited. We're too geeky about this one.
I also feel like I'm up in my my gameplay. Like I'm starting to figure out questions. Like I need a question that he can't answer. Like he wouldn't even think of asking. So, and this is one of those questions. I almost rolled the dice. I almost only wrote down one question, and then about an hour before the show, my anxiety took over, and I was like, "Oh no, man, you can't do that. You need to write some down because the moment you think, well, it's Caleb. He's going to do it." All right. So here's my question. Listen, one of the things we talked a little bit about the fact you brought up that the movie did change a few things from the book. Some of them significant in terms of the role that characters play, but not necessarily significant in the telling of the larger story that is supposed to be told here. One of them is Chani's role at the end of the movie. Okay. So in the book, and I'm going to give you what happens at the best of my recollection because
that's helpful because I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh wait, if I say I don't know before you even ask the question, that's not a good sign.
I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you. Yeah. So in the book, Chani sort of knows that Paul is going to offer to marry the daughter of the emperor. And has kind of resigned to doing it, becomes sort of like the concubine who he actually loves. And there's a long story of her adding contraceptives to the emperor daughter's food so that she can't conceive with Paul because she loves Paul so much, kind of thing. And in this movie, she clearly is playing a whole different role. I think a very important role, the role of what I hope that reasonable society plays when met up against sort of fundamentalist religion and false messiah kind of things going on. She plays a very essential role. But at the end of the movie, we see her kind of with her face to the desert and moving in her own space, even as it looks like he's going to march towards being the governor or whatever they call it of the planet Dune. Do you think that she'll continue on that path and they'll completely change the character? Or based on what you've seen in the movie, do you think she has a different role to play, and what would that be?
I think that she's ultimately.
Did I just show my geek flag too much? I feel like all of a sudden I was like, Mark, most people are like, oh my God, listen to this guy. He needs to get a life. He's a little too invested.
No, we love that, Mark. We love that. That's what we need. We need the geek flags to fly. This is the Moonshine Jesus show. And let's just be honest.
That's what we do. That is what we do. You're right.
I'm
very curious about your answer though, because I'm not sure.
I think she's going to play a similar role to that in the book, but I think she's going to be a little more independent to reflect the times, because we saw in the first movie kind of this premonition that he might offer to marry the emperor's daughter. And then we see after he has drank from the water of life that he has this vision where he says that ultimately...
I just hold my glass up. And mine's full, but I want to be honest. I had two glasses here, so it's not like I was going to say I wasn't holding back.
I've been making my way through it, so
I wasn't holding back on you. It's fine. So you think that she's going to play a similar but different role?
A similar role, but to be a little more independent, because after he has drank from the water of life, he says that ultimately she comes to terms with it and she accepts it. And so I know that he's seeing one of many possibilities there, that it could change. He recognizes there's the ability to change, but I think ultimately she's going to come and stand by his side in some way. That's what I think. What do you think?
I honestly asked the question because I'm not 100% sure. Just because of the way that they stepped away from the book. How important her character feels and how strong and grounded she feels.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that she's going to come back to him.
Mm-hmm.
I almost feel like he's going to reach out to her. And this is not in this is obviously going against everything in the book. Yeah. But I think it's necessary if we're going to redeem his character. And I'm not saying we should or need to, but I suspect from the fact that it's Chalamet and that people want him to be redeemed, that we're going to, at least in a small way, redeem his character. I'm not a fan of Chalamet, if you haven't picked up on that. Although he did really good in this movie. I'll give him that. I've never liked him in anything. There were moments where I forgot it was him in this movie, which that's a big deal.
That's pretty good.
A big deal. Yeah. That's a big deal. But I feel like that it's so necessary in terms of being real about the moviegoers and what they're going to expect for him to be redeemed. That's why we heard him say twice, "I will love you until I take my last breath." And she did not say that. He said that. I think that was kind of the setup that his desire for her is deeper, and that he will reach out to her, and that her being so grounded as her character that she'll say, "I want to be with you, but not like you are now. I want," and we haven't talked much. Boy, I could go on another 20 minutes about this. I think she's going to basically say, "I want the Paul I met before he took the water of life."
Yeah.
That was a changing moment for that character.
It was.
And I think that that's what we might see. We'll see. We'll see though. Okay.
I like that.
I got a little dramatic there. I'm not sure why.
I love it. You know who else did a really good job of making me forget who they were in this movie?
It's the person that I did not agree with. I'm sure it's exactly who I did not. Go ahead.
Christopher Walken.
Christopher Walken, yeah.
No. Shoot.
No.
You were Christopher. You didn't like Christopher Walken in that role.
Literally, I wanted to because I like Christopher Walken as an actor.
Yeah,
he was so Christopher Walken.
I was watching this. I'm like, this is the least Christopher Walken I've ever seen Christopher Walken be.
But a little Christopher Walken is still a lot of fucking Christopher Walken. I mean, I'm also not a big Dave Bautista fan like a lot of people are.
Yeah,
and there were a few moments where I pulled out because of him. Yeah. Every time Walken walked on the screen, my head went, "Oh, it's Christopher Walken."
It's Christopher Walken. There's Christopher Walken being Christopher Walken. Yeah.
As soon as he starts talking, you can't get past it. I was like, I saw him sitting there.
Get past it, Mark.
You can get past this. Every time. The Emperor. I'm the anyway, so when he was sitting there, the first time we get introduced to him, he almost says nothing. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's a brilliant use of Walken. Like, you bring him in because he is a iconic figure. Iconic figure. But have him play the sad, lonely, indecisive emperor who barely talks at all. That's perfect. But then he starts talking. I'm like, oh crap. That's in
all fairness, he doesn't talk a lot. But you're right. But he's still. But when he talks, he is Christopher Walken. No, I hold that he's the least Walken we've ever seen.
I agree with you. Completely agree. If I had to nitpick it, like if I had to find something that I thought was like, you should have done better, that's the one. I get why you cast him because he's Christopher Walken. I mean, he's freaking Chris. Come on, Christopher Walken. I mean, but for me, that's the only thing that would pull me out every time. So, all right, you have a question for me, probably, right?
I do. I do. So,
I've avoided it as long as I can.
It's related to yours. So, and it's about not just Chani, but women in general. And I'm curious. We get this group of people who are kind of women, have these kind of witchy powers, and they're
Benny Gessetti, something like that.
And they're the only ones who can drink from the water of life and survive and all of that. And then we get this Messiah figure who is a man who can do all the things that the women can do.
That comes from their line, though.
That comes from their line, but can do all the things that women can do, but better. So I'm curious, what statement does that make on women? You're
help me out a little
bit,
hook,
aren't you? You're gonna let them off the hook.
No, I'm wanting to understand the question better.
Okay.
How is he better at it That's the part I didn't necessarily pick
because
up
he can
on.
see because any of the women who drink from the water can only see in the past. They can only see what has happened, and he, through drinking through the water, can see the future
I
and the
think
past.
I think his in utero sister in a few times talked about the future.
So you think she's going to be able? You think she's going to have the same power?
I absolutely think she's going to have the same power.
Okay,
I got to say,
so,
in the books,
yeah,
we get her birth before this movie ends,
right?
And she kills the Baron. She's the one that does it. As a child, she is beyond brilliant. Like she is an 8-year-old with a 90-year-old's mind, like a healthy, functioning, like understanding the world and how anything happens. And so, I mean, there is still the problem. And I honestly think if we're going to, it's one of the things I'm surprised we didn't talk about. If there's going to be an actual savior, we get a false savior for sure. Paul is a false savior.
Okay.
There's no doubt that that's what's happening. If we're going to get an actual savior, it's Chani, man. It's Chani.
Okay.
They've set her up for being the one that's grounded and understands morals. Even in some small ways, the emperor's daughter, while she's rolling along with what's being chosen for her because she recognizes that she can't do anything about it. In a lot of ways, she's also trying to figure out how to edge things towards a higher moral. On some levels, it's her own definition of morals, but it's still not horrific. So
I like that. Chani. I like that. So Chani's going to be she's going to be the savior.
I like really that. Feel like they're at least setting her up for the great potential of being that, and I hope that pays off because I think they've got her at the right space to be that actor because she cares about the people. She cares about the land. She doesn't care about the power. Matter of fact, the power pisses her off. She runs away from it. She pushes it away. She wants to see the people come together. When the other girls are picking on someone from the southern tribe, she's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. I think that she's being at least has the real potential to be the closest thing to a savior figure we get in this movie, and may even ultimately redeem the false Messiah.
Ooh, so I like this. So we'll go from having a white male savior who will be revealed as a false Messiah, and
absolutely,
and our true savior will be a woman of color.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I love it.
From a marginalized position, that's theological. That's a great massively way talking about Dune. I love that.
I'm with you. Well, we still though have to decide on what we're going to talk about next week. This is the time of the year, man. As you know, it always gets a little screwy because we get like maybe one good sci-fi movie a month if we're lucky. We need to find something. And so I'm going to propose, because I really like Millie Bobby Brown, just because what a great
Stranger Things.
Netflix. It's so good, right? And she's so good in it. She's a new movie is coming out, I think on Thursday or Friday with her called Damsel. It's a fantasy movie. We don't do a lot of fantasy stuff. I think this would be fun. And it's about a young woman, who marries this like handsome prince. But then she ultimately discovers that it's a trap, and that her family, from what I understand, his family is going to sacrifice her to a dragon. And it's basically the story of a damsel who saves herself. And we don't get a lot of those stories.
Oh, I like that.
I think that could be a lot of fun,
good.
Right?
Speaking of saviors, female saviors, that's a great one, right?
Yeah,
I like
that's a great one. I think that's what we go with. All right. I think our course is set for next week. We give all of you so much thanks. We really, really, truly appreciate you being here. Like I always say, you're the reason we get to do this. And so we can't be grateful enough. So until the next time, we'll see you again on the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine